What's your process for creating character?
I mean, character, for me, it's like, it's kind of all together in the same thing of like trying to write them and see how they talk. I mean, I know everyone's different. For me, when I'm writing the characters, they talk to each other and they have their own voice, and it's something that I'm very interested in, is just how people speak. It's something I keep track of when I meet people. I'm just interested in everyone else's just dialects, I guess. And so it's sort of through, I often get it through talking, like through how do they talk to each other. And then there is that sense of going back and just trying to figure out who, like, what is happening underneath. I do try and go back through and be analytical in the sense of what are the, you know, the want need, you know, what is their kind of surface level goal versus the thing that would actually give them satisfaction in life or actually fulfill them, and how are those in conflict with each other, and try to think about their psychology in that sense. But because it's a medium of, you know, it's a visual medium, it's kind of we're outside of the characters, unlike a novel. So a lot of it is about kind of crafting what do we see of them, even if we don't know what's happening inside of them. You know, like what's the action that they're taking and going through, and how might we interpret that? And so there's a little bit of distance there too, and it's kind of being a bit changing hats and going back and forth, and sometimes really thinking inside the character and then trying to internalize that, and then going outside of them and looking at what you're seeing, and being a bit, you can at that point be a little bit judgmental of them, or a little bit new, I guess, like experience what they're going through new, because now you're trying to look at it through the camera. And honestly, thinking about actors is a huge way to, I think, flesh out a character. Even just thinking of an actor you really like who could be great for it, even if maybe you would never get them. You know, there's times when I think about years ago writing a script role I thought would be great for John Goodman, you know, and at a certain point you look and you go, well, John Goodman's not going to say that line, you know, that's not a good enough line for him. Like, why would he say this line? Why would he want, you know, and then you think, well, what would he say? And then you craft towards that. And that's I think that's a really great way to just trick your brain into thinking about a character in a new way, where it's not just your voice, but someone else's voice coming through. And then going beyond writing, I guess, into directing, it's really try to give the actors a lot of space and cast people who are bringing a lot more, like, just it naturally seem to have like an understanding of the character and like a depth of understanding of that character that goes so far beyond what you've thought of, that they're going to always be feeding new things into it that will let them kind of grow, enrich it, and become three-dimensional.
I would have to imagine, maybe I'm assuming here, that you've met so many fascinating people in just growing up, because you're from Canada originally, mm-hmm. but you grew up in Arkansas, mm-hmm. and then you spent summers in Ireland. Yeah. So you were probably exposed to so much interesting, you know, conversation, dialect. Yeah,
I think that's a big part. I mean, I always love, you know, the way people talk, and it goes beyond accent. You know, it's what are the words they throw in you know, in between the kind of you know, just the kind of expressions people use and all that. It's just always kind of interesting to me, probably, yeah, from jumping around to different places. And then also, I think, you know, growing up in Arkansas, and I consider myself really an Arkansan, you know, or Southerner, I guess, but still being a little bit just enough outside of it to kind of go, well, that's weird that they do this here, you know? And I think that definitely sparks a little bit of that, is kind of feeling a part of something while also outside of it enough to be a little bit analytical about it.
Sure, because yeah. I mean, again, I'm just assuming, but in some way you were maybe an outsider in all those parts, because you never really were totally from one place.
Sure, I mean, I think that's 100% true, and you know, it's the kind of thing where I didn't really feel like I was from the South or in Arkansas until I moved to LA. and then you kind of realize the sort of total sum of your experiences, and even though there I would maybe be not as much of a local, despite living there, you know, most of my life, or at least most of my life before I moved to LA. But when you then go somewhere else totally different, where people are from New York or they're from wherever, other countries maybe, you kind of go, okay, I get it. Broad strokes, I am this thing. But yeah, it's a little bit of a lot of different hats and perspectives, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's probably helped with characters, just because you've been, you know, different meanings behind a word.
Totally. Yeah.
Bless your heart, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Means different things in, you know, different parts. And I think that's great that you had that experience. You said on Scott Meyer's Go Into Story, I think you were interviewed by him, that you ask a question sort of the character, what is their greatest fear? And then that's where the character will really come alive for you. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't remember saying that.
Oh.
That was such a good interview, though.
He's awesome.
He was so smart, such a smart analyzer of the script.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, I think I guess I can't remember that now, because related to that was one of those things I think related to trying to fully flesh out that character, especially in Shelter. Although we have like 3 different characters, female characters, who are really driven in their own way, right? And it was kind of figuring out how, like what really drives them, and they were all a little bit driven by fear, really. And I think that's pretty true to life, you know. I think it's well, everyone has goals and dreams and things like that, but so much we operate out of fear, or just concern about what if things go wrong. You know, what's the worst that could happen, that kind of thing. And that script very much, I think probably any good drama really is about somebody overcoming, like being driven by their fear in some way and then overcoming it, you know, in another. And I guess that goes back to the want-need, like, because generally what people need is to find some kind of like balance or comfort, or to let something go, but they're like too afraid to approach it, so they have some other goal or some other thing that they put in front. Kind of like you spoke about earlier, of, you know, in terms of the movie, Greg, it's like always going forward, because that's easier than the thing that's beneath the surface, that you can't say, oh, well, we're going to work on this for 2 hours and fix it, you know, the way you would something mechanical or whatever.
Yeah, and it seemed as if the young people that went along with him eventually almost somehow got in that mindset too. I know there was so much resistance in the beginning, but then maybe they started to see the same thing, and it was about going forward. Yeah,
and it's, I mean, in real life too, I mean, that's really what Greg is trying to do, is to show them, you know, everyone's looking kind of through tunnel vision, right? And to say, actually, there's this whole other world, there's all these different directions you can go. It's not just this one path or that one path. It's so much bigger than that. And it's, you know, it's kind of Plato's cave in a way, or what Matthew would always say is like the blinders on a horse, you know, is taking the blinders off the horse is what he was trying to do. And I think that's sort of what just happens by being on that journey, is they can't help but see the bigger picture a little bit.
I believe you said in a previous interview that in Hard Miles, you talked to Matthew Modine about his character, Greg Townsend, and maybe you both discussed the backstory about the father. And correct me if I'm wrong, please, did Matthew think maybe that the father story should have maybe been toned down or not in the film?
Yeah, that was something that we discussed early on. And, you know, from Matthew's perspective, it kind of was a sort of a thing of like, where do we want to put our focus? Which kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, like what is the movie? What is the story? And to Matthew, there was a lot of talk around the brother, a lot of talk around, and then the whole scene with the father, and just, look, if we take this out, is there more time for the boys, like the boys and their relationship with Greg? You know, could that be expanded on or elaborated on? Is this where we want to put our resources, given how limited our resources were on the movie? It was also initially a scene that was very overwritten, like, you know, when Matthew got the script, it wouldn't have been in as good of a place as I would normally like send a script to an actor who, like, if I hadn't known Matthew, I'd worked with him once before, and I think if I had known Matthew, I would have been wary of sending it quite at that point. And so it wasn't quite fully working either. It was something that we would have to figure out, and did figure out together, he and I, in terms of cutting stuff and rewriting and just paring it down, and then even more in the edit. But yeah, initially the question was, is there something better that could take up this time and space than what's here? For me, it was really important. It was really important that Greg was driven in the same way as the boys, and that we would see the potential. It's not, you know, something that happens, or I guess in a way aspects of it happen, but we wanted to see the potential of Greg comes from somewhere that pushed too hard. You know, it was too hard on him. And is that something that could happen with the boys, or like at least an understanding of he comes from somewhere that's too hard, and he has to find that balance in what he's doing with them. And I just thought that layer, without that layer, that the story would be very, I just feel like very, like, too slight or too pat, you know, too easy. And yeah, so it was kind of a thing of like, we're definitely doing this. And Matthew, you know, it was never a situation where, you know, and especially to his credit, and I appreciate his trust so much, because he knew that the script wasn't right. Like, you know what I mean? We had notes on the script, and we talked through and we did writing, but instead of him saying like, hey, I've got some notes, and if we can resolve these notes, then yeah, I'd love to do it, which would have put him in a position of holding all the cards and kind of having all the power. You know, he specifically did not do that, and read the script and said like he wanted to do it. And then from there, as collaborators, you know, kind of equal collaborators, we talked through what we could and should change, which I just think is great. You know, like such a better situation, because then I could be honest about things, and he could be honest about things, and it wasn't like a situation where maybe I would have had to say, oh, okay, yeah, this is the better version, after changing it, and not really feel it, you know, because then we wouldn't arrive at the best movie together.
Yeah, and I think it made Greg's character, or Matthew Modine's character as Greg, so much more relatable, because you saw that even when he was pushing, that he wasn't really above these kids. He used to sort of be one of them, right. And he wasn't one of these people that work within the system that maybe they got the job just because they thought it was noble, but they
right.
hadn't really experienced that. And you know, so we saw some of the good in the system, and then some of the maybe ones that didn't totally understand the kids.
Right.
And I think that's a daily reality for social services, and
yeah,
you know,
absolutely
showed more depth, and that he was really a caring person, even in moments when maybe he got mad.
Right. Exactly. And I think too, something just in terms of process is just like how important communication is, and trying, because for me, I always knew, well, we'll never let it be the thing where it's the bad version of this scene. You know what I mean? Like, we'll cut the scene before it's the bad version, like in terms of like the actual confrontation with the father in the end. But just kind of like talking through with someone, okay, because I fully understood his concerns about the scene, the way it was initially written, you know, and just finding that thing of remembering people don't know how you see something playing out. You have to talk through it and find that, you know, make them see how you're seeing the scene, so they can understand that they're in good hands as you proceed forward to trying to make it the best version it can be.
Sure. And there's so much leading up to that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't want to give away spoilers, but there's so much pulling at him. Again, you said there's like something happening at all times, like almost like a movie, really. Yeah. It's falling apart at all times, and he's trying to keep it together.
Yeah.
And it was very challenging. So.
Well, the thing, I mean, that was I talked earlier briefly about you know, how we're restructuring things, or as you're watching the movie, or as we were shooting the movie, I mean, didn't always know, okay, this is scene 3, but it could be scene 1, something like that. It was something early on that I thought about, which was Greg on the stationary bike, you know, he's riding, he's going so hard, but he's not going anywhere. You know, like that's what that is. And that ultimately became basically the first shot of the movie. It's the second, but the first shot proper, I would say. And yeah, that's kind of that thing of all of this momentum and spinning wheels and all this stuff, but you're still stuck where you are. And that's what all that with the father is for me in the movie. You know, it keeps him stuck. For the movie Greg, I always want to say the movie Greg because he's a real person, you know.
Sure.
Who dealt with things. It's a true part of his life, but he dealt with him on his own, in his own way, in his own, on his own terms and on his own timeline, you know.